How's everybody doing this morning? Good. Excellent. One person, excellent. How about that Sunbelt party last night? Were you there at the Sunbelt party? Wasn't that great? Let's give Sunbelt a hand for that one. They do such an incredible job. Perfect. All right, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to introduce our panel as soon as we watch this video from our sponsor, BMS CAT. So I'll be back with you in just a sec.
At BMS CAT, we know we aren't just rebuilding houses. We're rebuilding homes. We aren't just restoring businesses. We're restoring livelihoods. We aren't just recovering property. We're recovering peace of mind. We know because we've been there. Since 1948, we've been helping families and businesses rebuild, recover, and restore their property from water, fire, and smoke damage. BMS CAT, trusted with the world's biggest jobs. Yours.
All right, thank you to BMS CAT. We have had a lot of great partners from our enterprise members here. Our enterprise members help all of this show go on, so thank you to them, especially there for this session for BMS CAT. We've got a great panel and great news. It's 2025, and we finally have a fire restoration standard. I get Cliff might argue with me a little bit on that. I know I was thinking in the CR video the other day, the Marty King Award, that there was the guidelines that Marty King had written, obviously provided an enormous background to the industry and actually are referenced in this standard. But as far as an ANSI standard, we finally have a fire standard. And man, what a story, what a background to this effort. And I never would have thought that it would be all the way till 2025 that we would have this standard. But the folks that we have involved in this panel are all experts on this standard, have been involved with it for many, many years. I'll give them a quick introduction. Bran Lynch is the consensus body chair. At the end, Bran is with Belfour and was involved with the consensus body as the chair since it started in 2019, correct?
From the start, yeah.
Yep, right from the start. And then John Pletcher, Restore Tech up in Virginia, was the vice chair of the S700 consensus body, and then was involved with FS1 and FS2? FS2.
I was to FS2.
Both involved in FS. So you're going to hear us talk a little bit about FS1 and FS2, what that means here in a bit. We get a little bit of a history lesson as to how we got here. Of course, Cliff really doesn't need an introduction, but Cliff Zlotnick was also a consensus body member and has been involved in the fire restoration industry training and certification for many, many years. My name's Mark Springer. I'm the moderator for this group that probably doesn't even need a moderator, but I was involved in this process back prior to when I was the RIA president from 2020 to 2022, and involved in making sure that RIA's work did not go away and that it was able to be integrated into IICRC's effort. So we've got a bit of a background on this as to how we got here, and Cliff is going to talk about sort of how the chronology of events went from 1997 to the present, and then I'll jump in a little bit there with you, Cliff, when we get to the era of the transition to provide a little bit of background there. But why don't you start us off with sort of this background?
Okay, well, 1997, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. The 1997 was the second, actually, guidelines for fire damage and smoke restoration. Marty King wrote the first one solo, and then it was revised, and that's the 1997 one. So that was the first published one that had, some consensus in terms of developing it and other thoughts, other opinions, and so on and so forth. And actually, the 1997 one was also published in the UK. Actually, it was, they when they spell odor, they put a U in it. It's kind of like Canada. And actually, someone from the UK who was a member, very involved with the association, a fellow by the name of Bill Lakin, he anglicized that document. And he was real involved with the CR program, kind of teaching it for a while with Marty and so on and so forth. And I'll hand it over to these guys for 2012 to 2014 because I was not involved with
with that process. Well, I
FS1
know
or FS2 on purpose.
And so and Bran, you were involved with FS1.
Not really. No.
Not really FS1.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So here's what happened. Here's what I've been told. What happened? I wasn't really involved at this point, but I believe it was in 2009 that when Rusty Amarante from Belfour was the president of RIA, that RIA filed for the pins for the fire standard. And the reason, a question might be, why would RIA be involved in getting the pins for the fire standard? Well, at that point, IICRC didn't have any intent to do the fire standard at that point. RIA had some background in our legacy with the guidelines for fire and smoke damage repair, and so they filed for the pins at that point. And FS1 and FS2, Fire Standard 1 and Fire Standard 2, that's when you hear FS1 and FS2, had two different committees that began building that standard, okay?
No, if I could just interrupt, he used the term PINS, the acronym, police are here, and that's ANSI, and American National Standards Institute, yeah. And what happens is what those PINS are is a reservation, and what that reservation does is it holds your place, plus it prevents anything competitive with that placeholder.
Okay, so that's the background of where RIA was at. And I think Patty Harmon is in the room itself. Yeah. Oh, there she is. Patty, have I said anything that's drastically wrong so far? Oh, no. Okay, good. So Patty, of course, had a long legacy with RIA, and ASCR was the editor of CNR magazine back in the day before she then went to Claims magazine and was the editor of Claims magazine. Patty's been involved with the standards for many, many years, so it's good to have you back in the room, Patty. Welcome. There was a long process of RIA working on these standards, and then a few years later, I want to say that it may have been around 2016-ish, that IICRC started pursuing a fire standard, and here's what my concern was, being involved as an RIA volunteer and also being an IICRC certified technician and master and all those things, was I was very concerned about a couple things. One was the work that our volunteers had done that was sort of going to go for naught at RIA. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of hours that RIA's volunteers had spent on the FS1 and FS2, and then the confusion that we would see in the industry of having potentially an RIA fire and soot standard and an IICRC standard. I'm old enough to remember, even though I'm very young compared to some of our distinguished guys. Well, I should say very young compared to. Sorry, Cliff, that was really bad. That did not come out how I wanted it to come out. But I'm old enough to remember when RIA and IICRC had some significant challenges. It was not, in my opinion, good for the industry. We are so proud of the fact that now you can see on all of your lanyards, IICRC and RIA together advancing the industry shoulder to shoulder. I think that's really important, but that wasn't happening. And so when 2019 rolled around, IICRC and RIA spent a bunch of time talking about how can we, for the good of the industry, take these two standards, bring them to the industry jointly, and have one standard. Do you guys think that probably is a good thing and that was helpful? Okay, so that's really, really important for us. It took a lot of sort of forward thinking from some of our leaders that we had, both at our IICRC and RIA, but I'm really proud of the fact that everyone was able to work together to do that. And now you can see on your standard, sorry, Cliff, let me bother. You can see that it says ICRC standard here, it's the ANSI standard, and has both RIA and IICRC here together on the cover, which is a huge thing for all of us working together in that. Now, once that agreement happened, Bran and John took over, and it took a little bit more time, I think, than we thought it would. I would not have thought it would take 6 years to get it out to the industry, but here we are. We finally have the standard now, and we're so excited that it can now be in the hands of restorers and help you guys in your restoration practice. So at this point, John and Bran, I'm going to hand over to you guys to talk about the folks that actually did the work here. So Bran, we'll start with you, kind of talking about the consensus body and how that process worked.
Yeah, so we met every Thursday. Help me with the time, John. Was it 4 o'clock?
How could you forget?
Well, because I needed to. Hour and a half every week. Yeah, so it was an hour and a half every week for years and years and years. And, it was an amazing experience for me. And I really respect all of the folks that I did have a chance to work with on this, and got, fairly close with some of these folks because you meet with them every week. So, we got some personal background on some folks. So if any of these folks that we mentioned next are here, we would appreciate it if they would stand up.
If you're on the consensus body, the S700 consensus body, please stand up.
Yeah.
And you're here. I know Dave Mason's here.
Okay, Dave,
Yeah,
okay,
John
yes.
Smith.
Let's thank these guys. Folks, it is, nobody has any idea the amount of hours that are spent.
Oh,
You said
yeah.
every Thursday?
Every Thursday for an hour and a half. And that's just the call.
That's just a call. Then
Then
there's
you
all
got
the work
homework.
to do this,
Yeah.
okay? And I want to make a pitch here, okay? Because one of the only way these standards can actually help our industry and we can see them maybe get developed a little bit more quickly is to have restoration practitioners putting their hands up and saying, we want to help out with this process. And I told Brandon Burton, who's the chair of standards over at IICRC, I said, Brandon, if you need volunteers for your standards and you want the best volunteers, you need to make sure and talk to RIA because RIA has the best volunteers and the best practitioners who can help make sure that these standards are brought to the market in a way that can help the industry. So please, folks, if you have a desire to get involved in giving back in this area, it's a great area to be involved. Go ahead.
It is. So we didn't go through the entire list. We had Rodney Harris.
They're up on the.
What?
They're up on.
Yeah, I want to just make them stand up. Brad Kovar, Ed Light, Dave Mason, Scott McFadden, Dave Robbins, Chris Rosnowski, Josh Smith, Greg Weatherman, Mehmet Yukar, Lawrence Wyman, and Cliff Zlotnick. These guys, like I said, have really become good friends, and obviously couldn't have done it without them.
Learning experience.
John, make sure you guys put the mic real close to your mouth. Yep. What do you
One
have
thing
to add?
real quick. We owe this man right here a huge debt of gratitude because we were, RIA's FS2 and FS1 were dead in the water. We lost the publisher, the standards publisher, and IICRC got the pins taken away from us because it was a little bit of a politics thing going on here. But this man, I know he had other people that were working with him, but he took this document, the FS2 document, FS1, and he went to IICRC and read the whole thing in front of them to sell that document to IICRC. That's what happened. That's how the strategic partnership became about. And we really owe this man a debt of gratitude. He's very humble and very modest. Thank you, Mark. And I want to say one more thing. I want to make sure everybody understands what a standard is. It's not an educational manual. It's not a teaching manual. It's a standard of care. And if everybody knows what standard of care is, what all you guys are doing every day. And what our job was to put it in paper so that people that didn't know what we do could say, hey, but it says in the standard this is what we're supposed to do. So we really think it's a strong document. It's designed to help you guys, but it's don't look at it as a teaching manual. It's a standard of care, and it's not state of the art. It's not best practices. It's what we're all doing. Reasonably prudent restorers.
Excellent. Thank you for that background, John. Okay, so Cliff, you're going to tell us a little bit about the foundational principles for the document. And sort of how its methodology is sort of
Yeah,
organized.
before we do that, just how we got to this was kind of interesting. This was not from the get-go of the standard. We worked for a couple years on this, and all of a sudden we kind of got in our head, well, wait a minute. We needed to put some guardrails up about what we're going to put in here, and then just as importantly, what we're not going to put in here. So that's when we ended up doing these. This was not in the plan from the start. We just kind of we just worked our way into these.
Excellent. Cliff, tell us more about that.
Okay, well, I think what's most important is in this particular standard, we had some advocates for the fire restoration industry on the committee. And what happens is if you don't have someone advocating for your position, someone else's position is going to be in that document. So from the very, very beginning, it was very important for us to advocate. And one of the things we're advocating for is we felt that we did not want to compound a mistake that we felt was previously made. And what that mistake was subordinating the restorer to to people who know less about our business than we do, to tell us how to do our job, and then in the end come in and determine whether or not we did our job well or didn't, and they have never done it. And fire damage, as all of you know, is much different than water damage. And it's easy for, we're going to extract the water, we're going to maybe do some demolition, we're going to maybe apply some antimicrobials, we're going to maybe use desiccants or refrigerants, and that's really about it. And, with mold remediation, I think it's similar. You're going to, remove some materials, apply, do some cleaning, apply some antimicrobials, dry it, test it, for all the moisture, and it's it. But every fire is different. Protein fire is different from a plastic fire, and people that don't know less about our business than we do, really, we felt were not qualified to tell us how to do our job, and in the end, tell us whether or not we did the job correctly. There were also some things that were going around in the industry, and one of the things that going around was, what's in a fire. We know that there are chemicals in there, some of which are hazardous, but there's also stuff in every home, in every building. There's a mixture of chemicals that are in there that are introduced from building materials, introduced from cleaning products, introduced from bathing, and so on and so forth, cosmetics, et cetera. And you can't determine after a fire by testing, determine what was caused by the fire. So naturally, the tendency, well, everything that's bad that's in here is related to the fire, when in reality, you need some kind of baseline determination before, and we don't have that. So a lot of the sampling and so on and so forth that some people would like to do or want to do really doesn't have a lot of support because there are no standards for that. Second thing is, the way that we would go in and kind of determine where the residues were. And typically what we talk about in the standard is we're going to do that by white sampling. We give a couple of different options for how we're going to do it. And we can actually kind of trace from going from the source of the fire, the further away we get, the less residue we see, and so on and so forth, and we can establish the boundaries. The third thing is we're going to use pilot test cleaning to determine what's restorable and what's not. If you don't test the materials and surfaces in that home with the cleaning products that you use in your business, how do you know whether something is or is not restorable? And we know insurance companies don't want bad news. They don't like addendums to the estimates and supplementals and so on and so forth. We want you to get it right from the very beginning. Every fire loss is different. So I think the cleaning chemistry you're going to use, I think the odor removal products and chemistry and equipment that you're going to use is a little bit different. And I think we all know that. So that needs to be considered. Another thing was, how does a fire affect our workers? I'm kind of worried about protecting our workers. And some people thought that our workers had the same potential occupational hazards that firefighters would have. But we're not fighting a fire. We're there in what's called cold scene. And a lot of the hazards have been reduced just naturally. They kind of go away before we get there. So what we need from a personal protective equipment is significantly different than what a firefighter would use. So what we did is we looked for an alignment, and we found that the closest industry that we could find that would have the same risk that we would have would be arson investigation. They're going to be in there probably even before we're in there. So we kind of patterned our recommendations for personal protective equipment based on what an arson investigator would utilize. Another thing was, could people get sick? Would our workers get sick? Can people in the homes get sick? And so on and so forth. And there really is no data that supports that. And sometimes this happens, maybe you're involved in a claim with a public adjuster and so on and so forth. And, my client, we have to bulldoze the house because they had a kitchen fire and, there's no structural damage. I think, we've kind of all been there. So, the fact that there may be some hazardous material in the home, so many parts per billion, doesn't mean that they're going to get sick, doesn't mean that it's going to create an injury to them, and that's not supported. We felt that for final clearance of the project, it needed to be white glove clean, and it needed to be odor-free, and that most important thing is we had a satisfied customer, and that we would involve that customer in checks going along the way. So when we would do assessment, we would bring them in at certain points. We want you to see this. We want you to know how we're doing it. Here we're going to use the white glove. At the end, we're going to have you smell stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about how we were going to have them smell stuff a little bit later. Last one. I'm going to read it. Most of it. A well-trained and experienced restorer with a history of satisfactory past performance are qualified to develop and manage a restoration work plan. In contrast, third-party individuals are not as effective in this role unless they are specifically trained and experienced in fire damage assessment and restoration methodologies. Now, many of you are familiar with the term IEP. Guess how many times it shows up in this document? 0. Here you go.
John and Bran, you are practitioners. You guys are actually doing the work. How does that methodology or foundational principles that Cliff just talked about impact your practice?
Well, it obviously what he's referring to is the mold industry, and I think everybody who does mold remediation now versus 15 years ago, it's a whole different ballgame, and the insurance companies, our benevolent sponsors, are putting restrictions on what we can do, and they tried to write mold out of the policy. We did not want to see that happen in fire, and the issues that came about with the fights that had to go on, and the extra cost, and what's the word? How do we subordinate to one of these people that was just going to delay the project? With fire, you really want to get in and get going right away. I mean, that's what your homeowners, what your client wants. So that's how it. That was really two goals that we really wanted the standard to do was keep those guys away from interfering with what we know how to do and what we've been doing for more than half a century successfully. And we also one of the other thing was we wanted to enhance the image of the restorer in the eyes of the public and the insurance community for sure. And I think it's done both of those things, the standard has.
Yeah, so I would just agree with everything John said, but I would add that, any restorer that's been doing this long enough, those foundational principles were already part of their practice, right? We just took the time and effort, and believe me, we worked on every single word on those foundational principles.
Yeah.
Like, was really examined and made sure that was the right word to have in the right place.
Yeah.
Which is nice to finally have it on paper.
Let me add to that, Brand. When this document went out for public review and comment, we got over 600 comments that we had to respond to, and then it had to go back out again, and we set the record. Set the record.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these were also designed. This really came in at the end of the document. We felt we had to say something. How we came up with a standard. What were we thinking? Because this is what we were getting hammered with in public review, which took over 2 years, I think, to finally complete. This document would have been done earlier, Mark, had it not been for the huge volume of comments that we had to deal with.
One other thing, we were very, very fortunate to have on the consensus body a certified industrial hygienist that was reasonable and practical, and actually had been both a friend and co-worked with Marty King on many occasions, a guy by the name of Ed Light, and he was the person that kind of helped us handle.
He wrote many of those.
Yeah. He helped a lot in the foundational stuff and getting the wording right about the hazards and so on and so forth. He did an incredible literature search. He just looked at everything that was ever published, and whether it was related to this or not, and did a great job to help us.
By the way, those of you who are in the audience, make sure you stick around. There is IICRC, in our partnership with IICRC, they have provided a discount code for RIA members who are in attendance at this convention. I believe it's like a 25% discount. So there is a QR code that you'll be able to take a picture of to be able to buy the digital or print versions of this at a discount. So make sure you stick around from that. Cliff, were you going to say
No, I
something?
just wanted to add one thing. Regardless of whether you buy the hard copy or not, you must get the digital one. The beauty of the digital one is it's word searchable, and you can cut and paste from it. So if you're writing an estimate and you want to justify what you're doing, you can go in, cut and paste the language, put it right into your report or estimate, scope of work, and so on and so forth. Very, very valuable. And again, if you search for IEP, you ain't going to find it.
I believe it's $125, Mark, so if you get a 25% discount, that brings it down.
Yeah, under $100.
Yeah.
Yep. John, I'm going to go to you now to talk a little bit about the general guidance from the document, and especially sort of maybe you can explain the difference between the standard and the appendix, sort of what those are and how folks should look at those two areas.
Right. Like I said earlier, the standard is not supposed to be an educational document. It's not a training manual. It's standard of care. So what we thought was to have something in there that was educational and informative for people who really didn't know a lot about fire that want to purchase the standard and use the standard. So what we spent, we had to convince IICRC to do this because they don't like anybody had the S700, there's a field guide, it's about that thick. It's thicker than this. So we said, how about an appendix? They said, fine. So we created the first section of the appendix. It's called Fire and Smoke Restoration Theory. And a lot of that is based on Marty King's guidelines. And
It's all the historical stuff.
it's historical, yeah. But it's
all put together.
It's the behavior of smoke, how smoke moves through a building, what the residues look like. By the way, this is the first, I believe, the first standard ever that has photographs in it. Is that right, Patty? In the IICRC, though. Do they? Okay. Well, and you can't describe things without pictures. Certain times, what's the difference between wet smoke and dry smoke, or plastic fire, protein fire? So there's photos in there, and the different things that we see, the nail pops and the ghosting, and the it's full of great stuff. So I think that in my opinion, that section of the standard is worth the purchase price alone, just to have that section. But we want people to read that first before they read the standard. If you're not, just get up to speed, because a lot of the stuff in the standard assumes that you know everything that's in that appendix.
Important distinction. So there's a bunch of sections. What we'd like you guys, as the standard chair and vice chair, is to walk us through what these sections entail. How can a restorer who's in the audience right now approach this document in a way when they have to use a standard, which you hope you don't have to deal with all the time, but when you have to approach the standard, how should you approach it through these sections? So Bran, I'll start with you. We want to talk about these section.
And we've got some sections of note there, and those are just kind of the ones that we really worked very hard on and spent a lot of time. Again, what is in just as important as what is not said, and for scope, purpose, and application. We were very, very careful, and again, chose our words very specifically for what this standard does speak to and what it does not speak to. So if it's not there, then it's not there, is the lesson. And sometimes we specifically say it is not this, but also just be aware that if it's not said for a reason. We spent a lot of time on that.
Absolutely, and let me add to that, if you look at the thing as you're seeing it on the screen right now, I think I would like everybody to read the entire thing, but there's sections that are about business, general restore qualification section is very good. It kind of aligns with the foundational principles. What we're essentially saying here is that you have to have proven experience and training, and that you've done one of these jobs successfully to be qualified to write an estimate for it. And I mean, we're getting hammered with, insurance companies, trying to jam their estimate down your throat. They've never done the work. So I think this thing is full. Anybody how many people are involved with TPAs, third-party claims assessment? Okay, it's frustrating, is it not? Yeah. So there's language in this document it's going to give the restorer a little bit of ammunition to go back to this, and who knows where it'll go. I don't know what's going to happen down the road. I can't predict the future.
A little closer to your...
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen down the road, but we'll see. There's stuff in here that we made a point of talking about things that they are particularly bent about right now with the TPAs and stuff. So that wasn't the sole purpose, but we wanted to tell them this is standard of care. It's not the way you want to manipulate Xactimate or Symbility. So the business sections are interesting. The assessment was very, very difficult to write. Cliff was really involved in that. It talks about setting the boundaries of the fire. You can't take a picture of an odor, and you have a protein fire. There's nothing to document and send to your client. I mean, you wouldn't even, if you didn't have a nose, you wouldn't have a claim. It's totally an odor thing. And then the equipment, tools, and materials. I mean, that's really critical now with what's going on with TPAs. The section, mitigation section, that Josh Smith helped us write that. It talks about the emergency work, and who doesn't do emergency work on a fire? It's often water related. We don't talk about water at all. We refer people to the S700. But we talk about what you can do to stabilize a house, board ups, tarp ups, all this kind of stuff. It's all in there.
And there's some pretty good information on when you get to a dispute, right? So if you have materially interested parties, I smell it, well, I don't. All right, well, let's, we talk about and tell you how to get through and get past those disputes. Specifically, here's the steps you need to take to do that and what that would look like.
Exactly, and then in section 6, we called this source removal, and a lot of this was from FS2. We took the outline of FS2, which was a completed standard. It just sat there, and try to make it work for us. So source removal is basically cleaning, but it's more than cleaning. If you're doing abrasive resurfacing, soda blasting or media blasting, that's not cleaning. You're refinishing the surface. The section 7, the HVAC has now become its own standard. I believe it's the 590, S590. Yep. Yeah. But it started in the 700, and then it broke off and became part of the 520, I think. And Tommy Iacobellis was involved with that, but he started with us, and we kind of hammered that thing out, and it went on from there. So, but probably the most important section, the section that's going to help you guys the most, is section 8. This is the odor management. We didn't call it deodorization, and this was Cliff's idea. We call it odor management. I would like to have him talk a little bit about that, but there's stuff in there that's helps people. It's going to help people get along with when there is a dispute, like Brand said. Or they're claiming they can smell it, and nobody else in the world can smell it. So it's not, if it's deodorization is a too broad a term. It's the way we manage odor. Yeah,
the other thing that we really went to great lengths to explain was that oftentimes, and I would maybe even venture to guess most of the time, it takes more than one process to restore something, right? So, the insurance company would like you to say, all right, I cleaned it once and it was fine, right? Well, not always. We tried this and it didn't work. I think we can do better. Now we're going to try this. So it's a process. And we mentioned that more than once in the standard, that it's not, oh, we'll fix it just like, no, it's a process. Bear with us.
Particularly with odor. Yeah, you want to add anything?
Well, no, I think one thing that's real important is the way that the standard was written is every person that was on the consensus body was responsible for a chapter. Some people were responsible for more than one chapter. And then people that were interested on the consensus body in those chapters worked with the person that was responsible for it all together, and then they presented it to the rest of the board and, would defend it and so on and so forth. And that's kind of how it was done. So it wasn't everybody working on one. It was done in unison, and those guys kept we made commitments when it was supposed to be done, and at every meeting, what percentage was completed, and so on and so forth. So the management of how that was done was really, really well done. But when it goes back to the odor section, I've been in disaster restoration for half a century, and the one thing that I'm really most concerned about is the loss of generational memory. There are things that we knew and things that we did that worked, and they're forgotten. And fortunately, I knew that a lot of those things were in the 1997 fire damage manual because I was one of the major contributors to it. So there were certain things I knew that were in there that I felt were valuable. So we were able to, everything that was in the standard had to have support, and we had to be able to prove that it was in the industry. It's a state of what's being done rather than a state of the, yeah, that's fine. I just wanted that, but I think that's most important. So in the odor section, one of the things that we used to do in order to determine whether something smelled or it didn't is to put plastic over top of it. And we could go into a whole room and put plastic on the ceiling and put plastic on the walls, and this way we could kind of use elimination in order to isolation, but we could eliminate, determine what smelled and really what didn't smell. And it was a good process. It worked quite well. The problem was it was expensive in order to do that. And one of the things that came up with was something that we called patch testing. And I learned about a guy named Jeff May. Yeah, a guy named Jeff May wrote a book, My House is Killing Me, and some others. He went to Harvard, very, very bright guy, does a lot of home inspections. He came up with this idea of patch testing. And what you would do is you'd take a paper towel and you would take aluminum foil and you would cover that paper towel with aluminum foil, put tape around it, leave it on that surface for a couple of days, and then quickly remove it and crumble it and go outside that area and open it and try to determine whether you could smell or not. And it seemed like a pretty effective way to do it. And interestingly enough, John and I were on a consulting project in his area, and the client was very, very uncooperative, and they told us that the insurance adjuster told us that they would not pay for us putting up the plastic and so on and so forth. So we decided we were going to do the patch testing, and we came up with this idea of accelerating it and stress testing it. So what we did was we took the paper, we dampened it, we put it under the plastic, or under the aluminum foil, we taped it, and we hit it with a hairdryer. So what we were able to do is duplicate heat and humidity and pull off a lot more odor. So that procedure is in the book. And the beautiful thing about it is you have the ability then, if you want, to create placebos. So if someone is complaining about an odor, we can go to test the odors that they consider hot or odorous or problematic. We can also take some other ones that are placebos and kind of place it in front of them. And, you think the odor's here, please tell us which ones are which. And, they're all numbered. And, by the way, some of them are placebos, but this is going to tell you whether or not, prove to you whether or not you can really smell it or not. And, we think that
procedure is also listed in the appendix.
Step by step,
because
and so on and so forth. So I think that helps us a lot with odor investigation and helps us a lot with odor clearance, particularly at getting the client involved with doing that. They can even do their own odor sampling themselves. So we thought that was important. I don't know.
John, I wanted to ask John a question. So I think another person that really spent a lot of time on this in its first iterations there, FS1 and FS2, and I can't remember which ones he worked on, was Lee King. And I remember talking with Lee. Lee was the RIA president before I was, and so we were working through a lot of the discussions with IICRC in that period of time. And Lee talked to me about some of the methodology that he carried in as to how the document should be used. I know it's frustrating for restorers sometimes when the standard gets sort of weaponized against them. I know Lee had some strong feelings about that, so maybe you could share that, because I think it's relevant for how the standard evolved.
Yeah, and I'm sorry Lee's not here. At least I haven't seen him here.
I tried to check and see if he was going to be here right before this, but his grandchildren were showing up, and I said, well, you've got a really, really good reason not to be here. So
Brandon and I were CB members of FS2, and Lee was the chair, and Larry Holder was the vice chair. And then Belfar left RIA. Everybody knows about that. And so they asked
everyone
me,
doesn't know about that.
They don't
Just
know.
keep going.
Okay. Anyway, after almost every meeting, Lee would say that we want to be careful. We don't want to put anything in this standard that's going to hang the restorer in court, that somebody can take and use against them. So there's a lot of what not to do in here, too. Not so much standard of care, but it's not. It's the trigger words that you're going to see in this document a lot are should and shall. It explains it in the beginning, but if it's a should, that's a standard of care. So there's a lot of should nots in there too. Just want to let that. Yeah, he was very instrumental in that, and we owe Lee a great deal of that too. He was on FS1 and 2. Great leaders.
Great leader
and a
good
RIA
man.
president.
That's right, good man. Okay, so precautions on owner management. Cliff, did you cover most of this?
I think that there was another thing. Certain equipment, particularly equipment that uses gases which oxidize, and we can use ozone for instance, can be very, very reactive. And there's a lot of data in the literature that talks about ozone reactions. As a matter of fact, those of you that were in the room during the Martin King presentation, there was a picture of a guy in a red shirt whose name was Dr. Steven Spivak. He was a professor at the University of Maryland in what's called fire science. It's like a world authority on fires, and particularly materials, clothing, because a lot of infants in third world countries, the clothing that's made is flammable, and if they get near an open fire, I mean, there's just a lot of losses and injuries due to that, and he had a passion for it. So anyway, he was teaching at the University of Maryland, and he had a student under him named Dunstan. And Dr. Spivak and Dunstan did an experiment. Because the University of Maryland had this fire chamber in which they did all this flammability testing, Dr. Spivak had access to it. So what they did is they borrowed over $1 million worth of air sampling and testing equipment, installed it into that room. The first thing that they did was they measured the fire, the residues that had been in there from numerous fires. And then what they did is they put in an ozone machine, and then they measured it again. And then they took the ozone machine out, and then they measured it again. And what they found out was the ozone removed some of the odorous materials, but what the ozone did is it triggered reactions creating more odors because it reacted with things called aldehydes. So that was really, I think the industry didn't really know about it and didn't know that it was scientifically supported. So ozone's great if you have an ozone chamber. You got to be careful if you're using it in a building because you can't see what it can potentially react with. So that was one of them. Hydroxyls, there were a lot of statements made about how safe they were and so on and so forth. And we had, world authorities on this, from universities and that we discussed it with, and they said we need to see the data. They don't have data to support that this equipment, can be utilized in a room with people working in it. It's not supported, and so that's kind of what this precaution is about. But it also deals with, thermal fogging and other types of airborne treatments that you would potentially make. So,
Bran or John, anything else to sort of call out in your thoughts on this?
Well, no, I think we were very careful in this precaution not to specify any specific thing, just like know these things happen and do your homework first is really what the message is here.
Yeah, who doesn't have an ozone machine? If you're in the fire restoration business, you use your ozone machine, and even they used to have them in restaurants. They're called smoke eaters to kill the tobacco smoke, but those were very low levels. The PELs, the permissible exposure limits, ozone, OSHA has those. You can't exceed those, and the machines that we use in our industry far exceed the exposure levels, so we have to be really careful with that stuff. Plus, it's a powerful oxidizer. If you have anything metal in your ozone room, it's probably got a layer of corrosion on it from the years it's exposed to it. We just want people to be safe. We discourage using on-site ozone because you literally have to guarantee that no one is going to go in that house, and it's not easy to do. So we're recommending people use it in a controlled room that's sealed and that's nobody's there when it's going off and that kind of stuff. We want people to be careful.
Cliff, anything else on this one? So, of course, everyone wants to know, how do I get this standard?
I want to say one more thing, Mark.
Yep.
I forgot to mention.
Go ahead.
When we working on FS2, we excluded contents. From the beginning of the S700, there was some push to include contents, and we were reluctant to do it, but we had a kind of hand-forced at one point in time. It's politics, but I don't want to go into it. But the section on contents is excellent. It's section 9. Some people will probably go straight to section 9 and just read the contents portion because that's all they're interested in. But the other methodologies, the source removal and the odor management, are critical to know before you go into that. So you kind of have to look at the document in terms of, okay, this is business, this is common sense stuff. These are the methodologies. And if you don't understand the methodologies, that section may not make sense. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And there is the S320, the content standard is currently being developed. Both John and I are working on that. So next iteration of the 700 will probably lack contents because the 320 will be out there.
Yeah, but at least we got it out for 5 years before they take it out. Yeah, who knows what IICRC is going to do. They're going to take the section on HVAC out, and next it's going to be the contents. So buy the early one and keep it because it's got the good stuff in it.
How many folks here own the standard already? Oh, good group of folks. Okay, so as long as we have the experts up here, I am more than happy to run into the crowd if we need. We got about 10 minutes left here while we wrap up a couple final things I wanted to get to. One is I believe the code is there. Yep, so you've got the promo code. It is available through May 1st. So you don't have a ton of time to be able to save money. We sure appreciate IICRC offering this discount code to folks who are attendees here of this convention. Like Cliff said, the digital copy, make sure you own that. If you want to be able to impact, again, the defensibility of your communication around the practices that you're using, that is a key tool in that process. And also, it's searchable, right? You can search that document, right? One other person, so let's see here, is Robbie Bradshaw here? He was here earlier. Robbie, are you here? If you're here, come up here real quick. I'm going to put Robbie on the spot if he's here. Robbie is IICRC.
He was here earlier. He came up and chatted with us.
Yeah, he chatted and he said he was going to be here. But Robbie, that doesn't look like he's here. Oh, well, we'll abandon that plan. I wanted Robbie to speak about, Robbie is IICRC's lobbyist. He lobbies not only in the halls of government at the federal level, but also at the state level. And he had some comments about how we are using as an industry these standards proactively. I was going to have him give a few words about that, but he is not here.
Yeah, he indicated to us that there was some interest with the EPA wanting to chat with us about the standard.
It's actually written in Colorado. Actually, the standards mentioned by number, S700 in the Colorado law and so on and so forth. So,
yeah, IICRC is doing a great job to get these standards out to not just our industry, but to the consumer at large, which of course helps elevate the entire profession. I know we have a few IICRC folks. I think I see Craig Powers up there in the front. Got the light right in my face there, Craig. Is there any other IICRC board members or volunteers, other standard consensus bodies here? If you're here, please stand up. I know for sure Craig. Is there anybody other than Craig? I can't see out there in the light. But anyway, Craig, thank you for your service, and thank you for what IICRC is doing to advance the industry.
I think one other thing that I would consider or suggest that you consider doing is buying some extra copies and giving those to maybe facility managers that you do business with, or insurance adjusters, key people, and so on and so forth. It could be a very good investment.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially considering how long it's been that we've been waiting for a document like this that can help us with some of the challenges that we have in fire restoration. I'm just going to ask, does anyone have a question about S700, any of its application into the fire restoration industry? While we have this distinguished panel up here, I'm going to move over here so I can see past the light a little bit. Oh, question over here. Just step right, if you have a question, step right up here, and we'll take the questions up here near the front. We've got Christine from Titan, and right here in West Palm Beach. So you didn't have very far to go. Okay, so what's your question, Christine?
So, okay, well, two questions. One, I'm very excited to read this book. I can't wait. Can't wait to get my hands on it. Does it address, in the IICRC other standards I've read, they talk about the effect of time on a project and how, it degrades, water damage and so forth. What about the acidity of soot and the effects of time? Is time addressed within the standard?
Excellent question.
I think that it is along.
It definitely is.
Yeah,
It's in the mitigation section.
Yeah,
For sure,
it's in
it's
there.
section 5.
And one more. And also pressurization of soot inside wall cavities and exploration and that
Absolutely.
Well, that's not standard of care, Cliff. You're going to find that in the restoration theory.
Gotcha. Right,
Yeah,
right.
and that's why we want people to read that section first.
Okay. It's in the book. Just tell me it's in the book.
Appendix A.
Yay! I'm so excited, guys. Thank you so much.
I think that it's also covered under assessment. The
It
fact
is.
that
It
you
is.
look
but
for clues and so on and
it
so forth.
explains how it
right.
gets in those cavities
Right,
in
right.
the theory section. But yes, we
Right.
do. That's one of the places we want people to look. It's part of their investigative demolition.
All right, we've got another question here, panel. This one is from Michael, Total Restoration Solutions in Cincinnati, Ohio. Michael?
Yes, thank you. I know you have the electronic version, and it's kind of cumbersome, though, with the software that you have to use. And I called IICRC just to try to get PDFs, and I guess they're not allowing a PDF of the document, which is kind of frustrating with, modern technologies to be able to search and put it in different programs and use it in different ways. So I didn't know if there was any way to get a PDF copy, even though we bought the electronic copy.
I think if you talk to whoever you're going to talk with it, give IIC a call and tell them you paid the money. Could you get a PDF version? I agree with you. You're right. It is cumbersome. It's a lot easier to use a PDF, and you can cut and paste and do all kind of stuff to it. That's not a bad idea. We'll push that along for you.
I did call, and they told me, too bad.
Uh-oh, Craig, sorry. I'm too bad. I'm sorry that I called you out as a board member now. It is searchable. Yep. Okay. Okay, so it is in the software. You can surf. Yep. Andy, I don't think I even need to introduce you, but Andy McCabe here from Bend, Oregon.
Hey guys, thanks for all the work. I know this was a labor of love and it's not always rewarding. I want to speak to the systematic bastardization, misuse, and misquoting of the S700. We're seeing that it's being used and abused against us systematically. Is there a way that we can get position statements or something like that when we see this? We know the same thing's going to happen with this standard. The S700, they're going to take it and they're going to misquote it. They're going to take little pieces that works for them. What is the process if we see that starting to happen? Can we get an official position from the IICRC on those types of things?
One comment is I think we were quite cautious about what we put in there. And again, in my opinion, we had more advocates advocating for restorers and trying to not let restorers get hung in court and so on and so forth in putting this together. So I think that you may be surprised that what happened in other standards really did not happen.
Yeah, we knew that lesson going in.
In this one.
That was
okay?
happening. Yeah, so we were very careful to, prevent that as much as we possibly could, to think, is that going to be flipped on us?
Pardon? Right.
Well, we had, Ed's Cross is here, is he not? I saw him earlier. RIA, I guess, engaged Ed to review the standard and make sure there wasn't anything in there legally that he thought could be used against restorers. So we had to go through that process as well as part of the, we got hit so hard in public review and comment, I can't tell you, but a lot of it was based on wildfire people, because it's such it's right now, I hasn't heard about fires and wildfires and stuff. That's what the foundational principles are, and I can't say this enough. The forward and don't forget the acknowledgments page, because that kind of explains what Mark was saying about how this thing evolved, but it reaches back to the days of Marty King before he passed away. And I don't want anybody to forget who Marty King was. And if you're in this room and you don't know who he is, you come and see me. I'll be happy to tell you who he was. And so will Patty. She worked with him for 25 years probably. So anyway, did I answer that question?
All right. No, so we're good there. But let me, I'm actually just had Robbie step back into the room. So folks, this is Robbie Bradshaw. Robbie is IICRC's lobbyist. So he is taking not only restorers, but the general cleaning, all of the standards and certifications that IICRC has, and he is lobbying on your and our behalf for those. So Robbie, if you could just give us a quick little update, especially as it relates, I know there's some stuff with 700 that you're working on. The Colorado reference in Colorado was mentioned too. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how you see 700 as relevant, that would be super informative for this group.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And sorry, I was outside. I got into another conversation about standards and stuff. But yeah, so in my capacity at the IICRC, my big role is to advocate for the certifications, but also the standard. Like, everybody should be following the standard. That's what we believe. And specifically last year, a lot of the time what we see is legislators have no idea about our industry. They don't know it. But they know they want to legislate it to a certain extent, because a constituent comes and says, oh, I'm doing something, and something, I had a restorer that did something wrong. So they try and legislate. So it's really my job to go in there and inform them of who we are as an industry, what we do. And that was the case in Colorado. There was a bill that was put forth that they wanted the Department of Public Health, I think it was, to develop a guideline for the cleaning of fire-damaged buildings. So they wanted a fire restoration guideline created by, frankly, bureaucrats. And so I went there and I met with the legislator and I said, hey, you do realize that, like, the IICRC exists, the restoration industry is a thing, and we actually have a fire standard coming out. We're in the last phases of that. And they said, oh, we didn't know that. So they amended the language to specifically state that the department needs to study this, they need to adopt a standard of some sort, and they have to look to any standards that are developed by the IICRC. So in talking with the Division of Insurance, they were very interested in the standard. And also, we're pretty sure that they would inevitably adopt it. I don't know if they are or not yet. They're still in the studying process. But that's really my role at the IICRC and the restoration industry in general, is to inform these legislators and policymakers and regulators that standards exist, certifications exist, and it's a way to better the industry as a whole.
Awesome to see that is not something we've had historically. So Robbie, thanks for your work on that, and thank you for the update for that. I know we have a few other consensus body members. Josh, is there anything from your perspective that you'd like to see mentioned about the process? I know I'm totally putting you on the spot. And if there's any other CB members here, I think we've got all of about 2 or 3 minutes here, but we could certainly address it. Hold that thought. Hold that thought.
All right, I would have to say that, okay, I'm Josh Smith. I'm from PHC Restoration, and I helped write this thing. if I had to comment on anything that you were doing with it, remember to, in dealing with the appendix, speak, if you're going to quote something, use the parts from the standard. Don't quote the appendix as part of the standard. And I know I just walked back in. But there's really useful information all the way across the board in this document. But I agree with the statement of we were really careful not to try to hang up restores or anybody dealing with it. It's fire restoration. We're just trying to remove the contaminants and the residues left by a fire. That's the bottom line. So read the document. I think you'll be pleased with it. Okay, so the question is, how do you search? The way I was searching was just the good old standard Control F, because it will search whatever you have on your screen, type in potentially your question, and then find it. You know, it's a copyright and a PDF style deal, so they're not going to just release it where you can print it and publish it on your own.
That was a really good point that Josh made about if you're going to quote something, make sure you specify whether it was in the standard or was not in the standard. The standard is exactly what you see, these sections numbered in the index or whatever, but if it's not, it's just like the field guide for water damage. People are weaponizing that against you know, restorers and saying, well, it says but it's not in the standard, it's in the field guide. So he's right. You have to make sure what you're saying is in the standard of the document.
There is one more slide, but it says, let's get to it. I'm leaving this slide up because it has the promo code, okay, folks? So at the bottom, if you can't see it, S700 RIA through May 1st, you can get a 25% discount off of the standard. So enter that code in, get the standard. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to these guys, not only for the panel, but thank you all for your many years of volunteering and working to benefit the property restoration industry. Folks, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being here.